Boomerang X is one of the most fun shooters I've ever played. Sure, maybe it's not traditionally a shooter since you don't have a gun per se, but whatever it is an absolute blast. The gameplay loop is really tight, and it's got an extremely well thought out sense of progression. There's constantly new stuff coming at you, and the game never gets dull over its short runtime. It's one of the only games I ever wanted to just pick up again as soon as I'd beaten it. You play as a ninja of sorts, wielding a boomerang shuriken hybrid, and you have to make your way through a collection of arenas facing off against enemies in waves. It's a very straightforward journey, but it shines with its unique mechanics and high level of polish. The game came out July 8th, 2021 on Nintendo Switch and PC, about a month ago at the time this video is going up. It was developed by Dang and published by Devolver Digital. To me, this is easily the best game Devolver's published since the original Hotline Miami. And this is only the developer's first outing, but they've automatically put themselves on the top of my list of devs to keep an eye on. If this game seems interesting to you at any point in this video, turn it off and go pick up the game. That's the point overall. I have some minor critiques, but this game is just so much fun. Timestamps are available below if you want to skip to any specific section. So I want to start with the aesthetics because I have the least to say about them. That's not to say that they're bad, they're actually wonderful. I just straight up do not have the vocabulary to describe how pretty this game looks. It speaks for itself, but I'm going to try and explain it anyway. The environments have this kind of cel-shaded comic booky look to them, and it looks gorgeous. Each arena has a very distinct visual style that makes sense given where you are in the world. The arenas start off more open with the outside world visible, colorful flora around you and shafts of light coming in through the ceiling. As you go deeper into the game's caves, everything gets more dark. We travel through the ruins of a civilization that seemingly got wiped out by these monsters you fight. The enemies are these shadowy, goop monsters with a pretty minimal color palette, and they still manage to all be visually distinct and readable. The music is great too. It's not something I even noticed until halfway through my first playthrough because it kinda just blended in. It's such a natural fit, I really couldn't imagine any other music in its place. There's nothing in the way of memorable riffs really, the score is just really fast paced and intense, getting you pumped up for battle. It's mostly organic instrumentation, plucky aggressive strings and percussion, occasionally a synth in the back of the mix adding some extra depth. It's great stuff. Onto the gameplay. If you've ever played a first-person shooter, then you know what's at the core of Boomerang X. Of course, this is a very unusual FPS, if you even are committed to calling it that, because you have the titular boomerang as your main weapon. The gameplay loop is very straightforward. You walk into a new arena and the game spawns a selection of enemies for you to take out with your boomerang. You only have the one boomerang, and it's like having a gun with one ammo. Of course, after you throw it, your boomerang comes back to you and you can throw it again. This is all very fast-paced and fun enough on its own, but the game also introduces new mechanics throughout that build on each other wonderfully. You'll play through an arena or two, do a short platforming section, maybe even get some lore from the game's only NPC. Then you'll find yourself in a room where you have to throw your boomerang at these strings, which will grant you a new ability. You'll get some new attacks and new ways to interact with the space around you. The most important of these is Slingshot. Slingshot is a simple ability, but it is an absolute game changer. After you throw your boomerang, you press the same button again to slingshot yourself towards your boomerang. You learn how to use it quickly and end up flying through the air. There's no way to sell how good this feels and how well designed around this mechanic the game is with just words. You really just need to look at it. You end up spamming the boomerang button just to keep zipping around the room. Pretty soon you'll unlock Flux, the very generous slow motion ability. Now you can slingshot through the air, activate Flux and slow down time. Then line up your shot perfectly before flying around the arena again. After these first few levels, there's almost no reason to step on the ground again, and the levels become bigger and more open to compensate. There are these health platforms scattered throughout the level, and if you stand on them for long enough, you'll refill a shield, this game's life bar. This is a risky system since it's not instant and you have to be careful not to take damage while you're trying to heal up. I never really managed to do this very often, I found it way too difficult to bother with, especially later on. But it's a neat mechanic nonetheless, and it does force you back onto the ground for some variety. The last thing I want to praise about this game is the enemies. Each level is made up of waves of enemies. The enemies in these waves always spawn all at once and no more spawn until the next one. If you die, you have to restart the level, but you have the knowledge of all the enemies in each wave and you're better prepared to fight them now. There's also no real bosses in this game. There are enemies that are larger or have more spots to hit, but they're not normally introduced in a big triumphant fashion, and there can potentially be more than one of them, or they can exist in tandem with the other bosses. This makes the makeup of these waves really interesting. This is solid stuff. The enemies feel perfectly placed and balanced. It's clear a lot of effort went into making sure each encounter felt special. The bigger enemies usually can't be killed in one hit like the grunts. They'll have these bright red crystals on them that function as their weak points. You'll have to maneuver around them in order to get your hits in. When a new enemy is introduced, there's a brief moment where you're trying to figure out exactly how to take them down, how to get to their weak spot. Now, there is one big part of combat that I've yet to talk about at all, and it's this. You do not have to kill every enemy. You're told at the beginning of each wave to collect a certain amount of orbs from the enemies, and the enemies that have the orbs have an icon above their heads. This is such a unique and clever concept for multiple reasons. For one, it lets you have a giant arena of enemies without you having to kill every single one. It adds a bunch of optional fodder for combo building and to act as nuisances as you try to hunt down your main targets. It also incentivizes constant movement, slingshotting yourself across the map to try and find the last enemy you need to get. The beginning of every wave is exciting. Just seeing the number of enemies you have to fight compared to the ones that actually spawn is intriguing. It's terrifying to be fighting dozens of enemies only for the next wave to tell you there's only one enemy you need to take down. Another nice touch is that some of the boss-like enemies won't always be mandatory to fight. That does a lot for the variety of the game. I haven't talked in depth about any one enemy, but you can see in the footage there's a decent amount of different creatures. There's ones that crawl on the ground, fly through the air, some have shields, some target you, and some just wander around, but all are memorable and easy to comprehend. There's a few I'm avoiding showing in this footage for spoiler reasons, just know that they're all great. To briefly mention the controls, I played the majority of this game on keyboard and mouse and found it pretty intuitive. The mechanics are added in a thoughtful pace, so the additions of new buttons aren't overwhelming, and all of these beyond throwing the boomerang are technically optional anyway. I tried out the controller towards the end of the game and it blew me away with how different it felt. Both were really fun in somewhat different ways. The mouse is obviously going to give you better precision, but the controller is a lot more comfortable to use, and the lack of precision kinda just adds to the chaos. Of course, I wish the game had options to display the buttons for PlayStation controllers since that's what I use, but I understand this is pretty niche and relatively unimportant, plus every game ever has this same issue. Before I get into my criticisms of the game, I want to switch to talking about accessibility for a bit. The game comes with a wealth of accessibility options that I think deserve a highlight. Before I really start speaking on this section, I need to make it very clear that I am not disabled in any way. I cannot speak on how well these accessibility options work for those with any visual, auditory, cognitive, or motor disabilities. I'm reviewing them from my own able-bodied perspective, and I'm not going to pretend to be a valuable source for any viewpoint other than that one. In the description, I've linked a video from a channel called Illegally Cited and a page describing the game's accessibility features and their applications in depth on the website Tammin Gaming. Please check out those resources for some more in-depth info. I'm not sure which game started the trend of these accessibility options that double as difficulty modifiers, but it's one of the greatest trends in indie games ever, if you ask me. There are options in the gameplay tab that can make the game easier, make the game harder, or just kinda change how the game works, as is with the no gravity toggle. If the options to make the game easier on the fly bothers you, it really shouldn't. If you're the kind of person that wants to avoid these features, you will, and if you're the kind of person who's going to use these features, you'll use them. Simple as that. These features can potentially bring in people who otherwise may have avoided it for its difficulty and chaos, and it genuinely does not change the experience for those who want to avoid it. Like all games that do this, the game does have a note that mentions that this is not the intended way to play the game, so there's no confusion. The only indication this game makes about whether or not these features are on is that there will be an asterisk by the speedrun counter. The game also has a specific accessibility tab. These options are great from my perspective, which we've already established is limited, but I can say there's a clear amount of effort to make the game more user-friendly despite its chaotic nature. And these features can benefit those without visual disabilities as well. I specify visual disabilities because that's all these options seem to focus on. I can't say for sure, but since the game doesn't really rely on audio cues, I don't think that's going to be too much of a problem. The colors of multiple important in-game objects are completely remappable, which works great. There's a high contrast mode you can see in this footage here. I hope this mode proves useful for some. It's quite fun to play in and even nice to look at. The other more subtle options can help those that just need some extra help. I myself turned on the ability to make the required enemies more visible as this feature was just helpful. And again, the game doesn't penalize you for it and my experience was more fun because of it. At least from my perspective, these are some great additions. I said my fair share of positive things about the game, and even though I still think it's a great experience, unfortunately I do have to share my gripes now as well. There are a few abilities in the game I found kind of useless. You get the ability to recall your boomerang early on, and in these early levels without a lot of movement, and especially without a lot of vertical movement, it makes sense. Once you start flying around in the air, and especially once you're playing with Blitz, Flux, and your 2 special attacks, there's just no reason to recall the boomerang. You're using the slingshot to fly around, and you already have enough on your plate just traversing the arena. You never really have time to sit on a platform and carefully aim, throw boomerang, recall boomerang, and repeat. It's not a big deal, I just don't get why it exists. Secondly, I'm actually going to talk about the final ability, which is the Oblivion comment. I don't want to get into spoilers, but I also don't think it's fair for me to criticize this mechanic without actually showing it off, so skip ahead if you want to avoid all footage with it. Just know that I won't even go that in depth on how this thing works. Anyway though, this thing is just underwhelming. Once you unlock the ability, there's no tutorial to show it off. There's barely an explanation, it just says, left control when ready. So naturally, I got really hyped up to try this thing out. You only get 2 levels to use it in, and you have to charge it up with a meter you fill by killing enemies, so you'll most likely only use it once or twice at all. This may just be me, but when I finally charged up the meter and got to use it after all that time, I had literally no idea what it did or how to control it. Since the game didn't explain how to use it, you don't know when or where you should activate it, and then once you hit the button to activate it, it's not clear what you're supposed to do. Even now, after 2 playthroughs, I'm not 100% certain on what I was doing. It seems like you teleport around the screen and insta-kill enemies you run into or run through, but the thing is just so hard to control and does not feel fun or satisfying to use. At least it's not overpowered because of this. That's all I have to say, no more spoilers now. Finally, there's a section in the very beginning of the game where you learn how to use the air brake. Basically, you hit a button and it halts your forward momentum from your slingshot ability. The tutorial they use to teach you is a simple and effective one. You need to slingshot yourself across the gap, but hit the brake before you hit a wall of spikes. The thing is, this has almost zero application in game. Due to how open these levels are and the variety of other abilities you have, there's almost no reason to use the brake. I found it much more natural to just use Flux and slingshot myself somewhere else. I would use the ability to stop in midair if, say, these spiked walls existed literally anywhere else in the game, but they don't. There's a level later in the game with these more dull-looking stalactites that I initially thought were the same as the spiked wall, but after purposefully throwing myself into them, I found they don't deal any damage. This is a missed opportunity on its own. Not only is it weird for this tutorial situation to never really come up again, but then you get to Blitz. So one of the last abilities you get is called Blitz, and it sounds like it should transform the game. Basically, if you get 3 kills midair without touching the ground, the next enemy or piece of ground you touch will set off a little explosion around you, killing enemies in your immediate vicinity. I was honestly kind of confused when I got this ability because I was playing the whole game midair at this point. I didn't use the little platforms throughout the levels at all. It really felt like the way I was playing was the way the devs wanted me to, and it was the most fun. I still think this is true, but let me explain the problem. With Blitz and the fact that the combat in the game is already so focused on being in the air at all times, it makes perfect sense for there to be a penalty for crashing into any surface, not just the ground. Imagine having to slingshot yourself through the arena and avoid hitting the walls and ceilings as well as the creatures in the ground. You're just an unstoppable machine, racking up a combo until you can finally unleash that energy in a shockwave. It feels like what the game was meant to play like, but again, even though there are spiky looking ceilings, none of them can hurt you. And the spiked walls never come back. So we have this mechanic that just feels very half-baked. It's nothing the game's actually doing wrong per se, but it just feels like such a missed opportunity. Surprisingly, it doesn't make the game too easy because you'll probably just smash into enemies by accident, and it's not powerful enough to be cheap. It just feels like the game could have been down well in FPS form, and it's almost there, but doesn't quite hit the mark. But what is maybe the worst part of it all is that finally, in the last level of the game, everything here clicks into place. The last level is so hectic and fully utilizes all the mechanics I felt were underused. I'm not actually going to specify what that is because I think it's a fun surprise, but basically every complaint I have is just thrown out the window for the last level exclusively. I get why the developers did this. It makes sense in terms of progression. The game slowly introduces new abilities and mechanics, and they all culminate in the finale. The developers are clearly very talented. They knew how to use these mechanics, and this was their vision. I get that, but why couldn't it have at least been the last few levels, if anything? Why couldn't have I just played like this for a little longer? A whole new game could be built with this in mind, and I feel it would make this already great game an instant classic. Maybe this is what a sequel or an expansion could be. I don't know, but it's just a shame. As much fun as it is to go through the game again in New Game Plus, it's obvious they didn't put too much thought into how the abilities would work with the campaign. There is a New Game Plus mode that you unlock after you beat the game, and it lets you use all the abilities you unlocked from the very beginning. Sort of. You do still have to unlock Slingshot, so you're forced to play the first few levels completely on the ground for some reason. It reminded me even more how little the game goes towards its potential at times on a repeat playthrough. If this kind of criticism sounds ridiculous since I've been talking about what could have been as opposed to what is, then you're probably going to love this game. I know I still did. So that's Boomerang X. Considering how good the game looks and feels, and the fact that it's published by Devolver, I'm shocked it's not getting more attention. It's light on story with just a little bit of obfuscated lore. It's focused on being a tight and short experience with no real lulls. It's a challenging game with a smooth learning curve and tons of accessibility options to help you play. It's the kind of game that's meant to be replayed. It's meant for people to speedrun it and chase the highest scores. I have some minor complaints, but this is still one of my favorite games of the year so far, and one of my favorite shooters ever. If this game seems intriguing to you at all, trust me when I say it's a must-play. I've been Sensitive Toad, and thank you for watching. Expect more videos in the near future, and please share this video and subscribe if you liked it. Thank you.